Aloha, Ohana and friends. It's time for Tales with Tutu again. And this week, as 4th of July approaches to celebrate that day, I have a special tale to read to you called White Wave. It's written by Diane Wolkstein, and it's an old Chinese folk tale, but it has a wonderful, wonderful message that goes with it. White Wave by Diane Wolkstein. In the hills of southern China, there once stood a shrine. It was made of stones, beautiful white, pink, blue, gray, and it was built as a house for a goddess, the goddess White Wave. But that was centuries and centuries ago. Now the stone lie scattered on the hillside. But if you should happen to find one of those magical stones, remember this story of the shrine, of the stones, and the goddess, White Wave, and the lesson she left behind. A long time ago, in the time of mysteries, a young farmer was walking home from the fields in the evening. He walked very slowly, for he was not eager to return to his house. He had lived alone for a long time. His parents had died 2 years before. He was too poor to marry, too shy to speak with any one of the women in the village, and so he lived alone. As he passed a small forest, he saw a small white stone, and it was gleaming in the moonlight. Well, as he walked, he thought, what a beautiful stone. The young man, whose name was Kuming, bent over to look at the stone. It really wasn't white at all. It was every color of the rainbow. It was white, blue, pink, turquoise. It was beautiful, and when he held it in his hands, he saw it really wasn't a stone at all, but it was a snail shell. And what was more, his most wonderful good fortune, it was alive. Well, the farmer gently carried the snail home and placed it in an earthenware jar. And then before fixing his own dinner, he went out and gathered fresh leaves for the snail. And he laid them by the snail shell. He ate his dinner and he went to bed. But the first thing he did the next morning was to look in the jar. The leaves were gone. Well, the snail had eaten them. Kuming picked 4 more leaves, went in, put them by the snail shell, and then went off to the fields to work. When he came home that evening, the farmer found his dinner was waiting for him on the table. A bowl of cooked rice, steamed vegetables, and a cup of hot tea. He looked around the room. No one was there. He went to the door and looked out in the night. No one was there. But he left the door open, hoping that whoever had prepared his dinner that might join him that evening. Well, the next night his dinner was again waiting for him, and this time there was a branch of a wild peach set in a vase on the table. The farmer made a special trip to the village to ask strangers if any strangers had arrived, but nobody knew of any. Every morning he left leaves for the snail, and every evening when he came home, his dinner was waiting for him, and always there was a wildflower in the vase. Well, one morning, Koming woke up earlier than usual, and he took his rake and acted as if he was going out in the fields to work. But instead, he circled back to his house and stood outside the window, listening very carefully. He was so curious. He wanted to find out who was doing this wonderful thing for him. He listened. There was no sound. And then, as the first light of the day touched the earth, he heard a tiny noise, a tiny rustling. He very quietly looked up over the windowsill and looked in the window and saw a tiny white hand rising from a vase. And then another one came out of the jar, and all of a sudden out leaped a beautiful, beautiful girl. She was pure light, and her dress was made of silk, and as she moved, her dress rippled, changing from silver to white to gold, and wherever she stepped in the room shone. Now he knew, though no one had told him, that she was a moon goddess, and she was magical. And he also knew, though no one had told him, he must never try to touch her, or he would lose the magic. Well, the next morning before he went to work, he gathered leaves and put them in the jar next to the shell. And then he circled around and he watched her the next morning and the next morning and the next. And as the days went by, the farmer's loneliness started to disappear. He skipped to the fields in the morning and he walked quickly home in the evening, and always his dinner was waiting for him. The house was shining, the air was sweet, and his heart was full. Many days passed, but one morning, as the farmer was watching her sweep the floor and clean his house, her long black hair fell across her face, and he almost forgot what he knew. And a great longing came upon him. He wanted to touch her hair. Well, he did forget what he knew. The desire burst upon him so strongly, he quickly forgot that he should never try to touch her, and he opened the door and he ran in the room. Do not move. Who are you? You know who I am. I'm White Wave, the moon goddess. But now I must leave you, for you have forgotten what you knew. No, don't go. Good farmer, if you can hold yourself still and count for me, I will leave you a gift. Let me hear you count. Count to 5. 1. She crossed in front of him and walked toward the door. 2. I'll leave you my shell. 3. And if you ever in any great need, you call me by my name, White Wave, and I will come to you. 4. There was a great streak of lightning and a great roll of thunder, and 5. A huge wind came down and swept the goddess in the air. He ran outside, but the rain poured down so fast he couldn't see her. He stood in the pouring rain a long, long time, but she was gone. He went back in the house. The snail shell, it was there, but it was empty. He picked it up. No living creature inside. Well, Kuming went to the fields, but he did not drink water or think of his work. He only could think of White Wave and how to bring her back. As he was wandering over the hills, his foot struck a stone. He bent over to look at it, and at that moment he decided, I know how I'm going to get White Wave back. I'll build a shrine for her, a beautiful, beautiful stone house where she might live peacefully and not be disturbed. He spent more time choosing the stones, beautiful white, pink, and gray stones. He spent more time picking out the stones than working in his fields. So when the harvest came, he didn't have very much to harvest. It was very small. He ate what little there was. He ate the supplies he had stored, and after that he had to live on berries and wild grass. Well, at last, one evening, the shrine was complete. But that evening, the farmer was so weak from hunger and thirst, he could barely walk. He stumbled in his house, and he tripped over the earthenware jar, and alas, the shell fell out. He quickly picked it up, and he held it high, and he remembered the words of the goddess, if you ever need me, hold my shell and call to me by my name, White Wave, and I will come to you. The farmer held the shell in front of him, and then he raised it high in the air, and with his last ounce of strength, he yelled, White Wave, I need you. And slowly he turned the shell towards him, and a wave of gleaming white rice cascaded out of the shell onto the floor. He dipped his hands in it. The rice was solid and firm. It was enough to last him until the next harvest. Well, you know, the farmer learned a great lesson that night. He never called White Wave by her name again. And with the flowing of rice, a new strength came to Kuming. He worked hard in the fields. The rice grew, the vegetables flourished. He married and even had children. But he never did forget White Wave, although he never called on her again. He even told his wife about White Wave. And when his children were old enough, he told them the story of White Wave. He took them on his knee and told them the magical story and how she came to be in his house and the shell that she left behind. Well, the children like to hold this shell in their hands as they listen to the story over and over and over. The shrine stood on a hill far above their house, and the children often went there early in the morning and late in the evening, hoping to see White Wave, but of course, you and I know, they never did. When the old man died, the shell was finally lost in time. And after time went by, the shrine too disappeared. You see, friends, all that remains from this is the story. But then, that's how it is with all of us. When we die, all that remains is our story. So make sure the story you leave behind is a good one, worth telling. Aloha. be sure to share a story and a kind word with a friend today. Aloha, a hui ho.